So recently, I bought a Canon M50 to start up my YouTube channel. I've owned my Canon M50 for about 5 months, and I've learned a lot since then. In no way am I a professional, but from the beginner's standpoint is where I have the upper hand, because I am literally a beginner. And don't get me wrong, I've loved my time with it. It has gotten me some cool clips and photos as I started dipping my toes into the water of content creation on a more professional level. But my decision to switch all started one day not that long ago. If you know anything about lenses, you know that lenses usually cost way more than the actual camera itself. You have anything ranging from $100 to, well, thousands of dollars. And no, I'm not that rich. However, I started thinking about future upgrades, such as additional lenses, filters, clamps, and a lot more other camera accessories. Then, considering potential camera body upgrades, I realized that the M-mount lenses used by the Canon M50 wouldn't be compatible with future camera bodies. This would mean selling the lenses along with the camera when upgrading, leaving me back at the start. So, I did some research on other camera options that would be more future-proof and wouldn't require me to sell all my lenses. And there's a lot to like about the Canon M50, but I'm gonna get into some of the specifics of what I personally enjoyed while using the Canon M50. And I'm not gonna go into huge detail because there are plenty of other videos out there that do that. So here is a few of the things that I liked about the Canon M50. First, I loved Canon's colors. They're actually really good and almost always pretty spot on. Second, I love the Canon Connect app. It's a little bit more simplistic and kind of all-in-one than the Sony. Number 3, the Canon M50 is small and light. Just like the Sony ZV-E10, they both have that in common. Number 4 is the flip screen. I absolutely love having a flip screen. Being able to see yourself in the screen is the best thing for a solo content creator. Number 5 is a viewfinder. While the Sony ZV-E10 does not have a viewfinder, the Canon M50 does. And that's super useful for when you're outside in very bright situations where it's hard to see the screen. Number 6 is the good battery life. The batteries are pretty small with the Canon M50, but they also provide some good length of battery life. There's a lot to like in the Canon M50, but that doesn't go to say that there's nothing wrong with the Canon M50. In my experience, here are the top 5 things that I didn't really enjoy. The first one being is that I had difficulties with the autofocus. And I heard Canon being praised a lot for their autofocus, but in my experience with this M50, I would always find my footage that I had either recorded or taken recently out of focus. Either it would be slightly focused onto the subject, or it would be completely locked onto another object in the scene. And this is a nightmare when going back and seeing that the footage is completely blurry. Having blurry footage makes it almost unusable, and when you have unusable footage, you'll lose footage. The second thing that I had a gripe with is the micro USB. And yes, this camera came out in 2016 and now it's 2024, but I still love that the Sony ZV-E10 has a USB Type-C. It makes it so much easier to charge and just keep one cable for almost everything I own. The third thing is the low light performance. And granted, you can get a lens that has a wider aperture, like something like an f2.8. But even at an f2.8, I found myself having a hard time to get good footage in low light situations. And yes, it's a beginner's camera, it's not really meant for low light, but I was hoping that it would be at least a little bit better than it actually was. The Canon M50, I feel like, struggles from a lot of noise that gets placed onto the footage. And when it's a noisy footage, it just looks really bad. Number 4 is the limited lens market. Like I said earlier, the Canon M50 uses an M-type mount, but Canon has recently discontinued the M mount and will no longer be producing more lenses. That being said, when I want to upgrade to a new camera body, I'm unable to, since I have to sell all my lenses, starting back to zero. And the last one is something very small. I had issues with the tripod that I use blocking the battery door. So when my battery would die or I needed to change out an SD card, I wouldn't have that ability. Now this is something that might not be a case for every single person. It just really depends on your tripod. But for me, it was just kind of annoying having to take off the camera and then put it back on whenever I needed to change, one of the two. So that's what I liked and disliked about the Canon M50. But here are some reasons of why I switched to Sony. The first one being the 4K capabilities. Canon M50 can shoot in 4K, but it has a huge crop and it's almost unusable in close, tight spaces. The Sony ZV-E10 also downsamples from 6K to 4K, giving you even a sharper image of 4K than you would otherwise. The Sony also is future-proofed with lenses. Sony is notoriously popular for their E-mount lenses. And there's so many. There's some made by Sigma, by Tamron, and by Sony themselves. And so your lens market is a lot bigger, and some of them are actually cheaper. Overall, the Sony also has better image quality. For photo, I love it. It's actually one of my favorite cameras to use for photo just because of the crisp photos that come out of that camera. So street photography is something that I love to do, or even portrait photography. I feel like it's actually usable on a more professional level. And the last thing about the Sony ZV-E10 is that it's about the same price. Now this is granted depending on the time that you buy it. Sometimes you have to be very, very patient. But I found on eBay, the used market, usually the Canon M50 would go for around $400 and the Sony ZV-E10 would go around $500. So it's a $100 upgrade, but I think that it is 100% worth it since you're getting that 4K capabilities, that bigger lens market, and a bunch of small little other features that just really are handy when you're filming day to day. Honestly, if you like Canon, I'm not trying to hate on them in any way. I actually really admire Canon and their ability to produce good quality cameras. But for me, I found that the Sony, at least the ZV-E10, is a little bit more versatile. In this sense, I don't need this Canon M50. I found that the Sony ZV-E10 has 4K capabilities, is able to shoot even higher, technically in 6K, downsampled to 4K. It has better autofocus for those times when I don't have somebody to help me out and I need to make sure that my shot is in focus. That is one of the biggest things, for me at least. And I'm not trying to convince you. If you want to stick with Canon, go right ahead. I think you'll still be able to do great things, great content. But for me, the Sony, I feel like is a little bit more of a straightforward path, and I wouldn't have to buy lenses for the M50 and then sell them when I want to upgrade my camera body as well. I just wanted to share my thoughts with you guys to let you know what I'm thinking, to let anybody out there who's trying to start up a YouTube career or just want to create some content. I think that the Sony might be a better option if you can find a good deal on it, because if you can't, they usually will be going for $200 more than the M50 will. But you are also getting a lot better quality. So it depends on your needs and your wants, I guess. For me, my needs changed within 3 to 4 months of using the M50. So figure out what works for you and what doesn't, and then take the path that best fits you. If you have one takeaway from this video, I hope that you can just focus on creating the content you want to create. Sometimes we don't need a fancy camera to make the best of quality videos. Sometimes the camera in your pocket is the best camera because it's whatever camera you have with you at the time. So get out there and start creating, and you'll surprise even yourself. But I wish you all good luck, and I'll see you on the next video. See you guys.